Roll call, please.
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Alderman Mayer is excused. Alderman Holper.
Here.
Bill Weichel.
Here.
Tom Trainer.
Here.
Richard Budney.
Here.
Frank Presco.
Here. Staff will pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since this is a special meeting, we won't have minutes from the last meeting. Since there's no citizens, we won't have citizen comment period. Move to number 3. That's been changed a little bit to recommendations to amend the 22 health insurance plan design related to the HRA HSA.
Okay, so in front of you, I did put a committee action sheet, and that basically was laying out the entire plan. We were hoping to have a plan for you tonight on the correction for the 2021 issue. We don't have that ready yet. So, oh, I'm sorry. This one. Yep. So,
We can all share.
so basically, you all know about the issue that occurred last time, to a small degree, but I tried to document it in the...
They're sharing. Was there an extra?
Here, I can, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, another one. I've got him.
Thank you.
So...
I get jealous.
The issues that we needed to talk about were 2. The first one was the recently identified issue, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail, as well as looking at the 2022 plan change. Because as we correct the 2021 issue, we know that the 22 plan needs to be 100% compliant, and we've been working on that as well. So in regard to the correcting the 2021 issue, we have, as much as we can at this point, quantified what the issue is. We know we had a qualified high deductible plan with HSA contributions prior to 2021. In 2021, we added what's called a health reimbursement arrangement, and that's stacked on top of the high deductible plan, and the intent was for it to sit nicely. We were using an access point of 1,500, so that's where the issue comes in, and that cannot be the plan that carries forward to next year. So I think I'm going to point you to the handout that I gave you tonight. I think this is probably going to be the cleanest way to explain it to you. On the left-hand column where it says explain it to you, on the left-hand column where it says 2021 current plan design, that's exactly what we have in place for 2021. And you'll see just before the examples start, it says that we have an embedded HRA contribution of $1,500 access point. That's the point in time in which the HRA kicks in. So if you think about it this way, an employee has a claim, and I'll just go right to the first example. Employee has a claim of $4,500. The first $1,500 in a high deductible health plan have to be paid by the employee. It's actually the IRS rule is $1,400, but ours was $1,500. So the employee pays that first $1,500 in claims. They are able to use their HSA contributions if they have them. Next, after that, that's where the HRA was stacked on. The next $1,250 would be paid by the employer. Therefore, I put it in the employer column. And then to get them to their out-of-pocket max of $4,500 for 2 that had claims of $1,500, that would solely be paid by the employee because they didn't hit that access point. We were planning on an embedded plan, which means everybody kind of hits their own deductible and their own access point. However, some of our problems have come in on that. Now I'm going to jump to the right column where it says 2022 recommended plan. We're not changing anything with regard to the deductible or the out-of-pocket or the HSA contribution. The difference would be on the HRA, we would not embed it for the family plan, which means the access point would be $2,800, which is required either way, whether it's embedded or aggregate. But we would do $2,800 for the family, and then after that it could be used accordingly. So for example, the same family member number 1 has a $4,500 claim. The first $2,800 now, the first $2,800 now, because of the compliance, has to be paid by the employee. The next $1,700 to get that person to their $4,500 out of pocket would have to be paid by the employer. And then if you had another family member with $1,500 in claims, the first $800 to get you up to that $2,500 max HR going to paid by the employer, and then $700 by the employee. So the reason I did the examples the way I did is, one, to show you the difference in the plans, but two, to also show you changing the plan design, how it can affect the city as a plan sponsor. Right, so in example number one, that the employer, instead of paying $1,250, actually pays $2,500 on that scenario. And then on example number two, I was showing you an example where an employee actually pays more. So the employer, under the 2021 method, the 2021 method, $500 would be paid by the city, and using the new plan, because of where the claims hit and by who they were hit, there's no money paid by the employer. So the employee in that scenario in 2022 will pay $500, have 21. And then example number three is just simply showing you the break even. That's if it goes in a different order of spending, but if there was $2,750 spent by each family member, you would see the exact same amount paid by the employer and employee, and really the change in plan design would be simple. Some of the motivation behind keeping the plan design the same was our employees are finally just getting used to this new plan, so to go ahead and make changes. We have dual option plans right now. Not only do we have this high deductible plan, but we also have a PPO, and there is a bit of an equilibrium or a bit of a balance there where people pay a certain amount out of pocket on a monthly basis for this plan as well as the PPO. And we were afraid that if we would have done something like increasing the Hsa contribution, we would upset the balance between those plans, but also we would be giving people money. The plan sponsor, the city, would be giving people money. The plan sponsor, the city, would be giving people money perhaps that don't need it to pay claims. And that's really kind of the rationale that we wanted to add the HRA for. So the HSA is something that goes to everybody no matter what. If you're on a family plan, you get $1,500 a year, $125 a month, no matter if you have claims or not. The HRA only kicks in if there are eligible claims. So when I look at what does that mean, right? So the next thing is, what does that mean to the plan in 2022? Can't predict that, obviously, because it's going to depend how many of our employees are going to fall into each one of these categories or something in between. But what I can tell you is the maximum increase cost to the city plan is approximately $97,500. And just to give you a gauge on where we're at, our budget is approximately $3 million for health insurance. So it's perhaps an additional $100,000, but more likely it's going to be a lot less than that. You know, I just ran a number of different scenarios. One of them, if you had so many people under this example number two, you're probably looking at somewhere between, depending on how much the claims are and if people have the same kind of experience they have in this current year, you'd probably be looking at somewhere between about $35,000 to $40,000. Would be looking at somewhere between about $35,000 to $40,000 different in the plan design. It still reaches all of the goals that we set out to reach when we started this last year. It's not enriching employees. It's really giving some assistance to those higher claim users. I don't know if some of you weren't here at the time, but basically we had $60,000 a year employees that were paying upwards of $10,000 on insurance. So like that was sustainable from a career recruitment or a retention policy, because basically the highest of all of our comps at that. So the City of Franklin did offer this high deductible health plan since 2019 with the Hsa contribution. HRA was just introduced in 2021. The issue that we're talking about, as well as the plan design changes, are applicable only to a family plan, because on a single plan, there aren't the same ramifications, right? So somebody has a $3,000 deductible, for $100 comes out of their pocket, the next $1,250 from the HRA, and there's no change on that. So our new administrator, UMR, who is actually the one who identified the issue to begin with, has confirmed that they can set us up. Basically, they'll just set two different plan types up. One of them will be for people on the single plan, and one of them would be on the family plan. And they have told us they can't administer this plan without exception, which means part of their normal operating protocol, which is also something that our previous or current third-party administrator, United Healthcare, was not able to do. A new plan design, the major difference in the new plan design is it takes the access point from 1,500 up to 2,800, and then it allows the 2,500 of HRA to be available to the entire family once that $2,800 access point has been met. If we break that down and we say, okay, how does that compare till now? Right, people in the family would have to meet the 1,500, and then they would get the 1,250. So the 2,800 is a little bit less. They get the money a little bit later in time, which could save the plan some money. However, the plan could pay more depending on the higher use that employees have. So I think that's pretty much an overview. What this does is this is a recommendation for 2022. So maybe if we can just talk about the nuances of the plan or the recommendation of the plan design. If you have any questions on that, I can certainly give you an update on where we're at on the 2021 issue, because that's not as straightforward. But we do believe by November 15th at the next meeting we'll have that resolved. Any questions on this? That makes sense.
Anticipating any pushback at all?
Depending on what kind of pushback you're talking about, I think, are there going to be some employees that are going to be unhappy? Absolutely. Is this still a step ahead of where they were at 2 years ago? Yes. 2 years ago, they didn't have the HRA available at all. I think the employees that have contacted me, employees right away the day after our meeting, and I did attach it to the packet so you could all see. Very little feedback. I'm sure there was a lot of informal feedback. I can't imagine employees are real happy about it, but the feedback that I got was things happen and we understand, and their question is just like ours. Happen and we understand, and their question is just like ours. How are we going to fix it? And I know the committee is also interested in what that answer is before it goes to employees, and it certainly will come here first. But yeah, so as far as pushback, they're going to be unhappy with the plan because I know the alternative without the HRA is worse than that. But they're going to love that they have to spend $2,800 before they get. Not going to love that piece.
How many people did you say? 45 or 65 that would be affected by this?
So we have 78 actives on our family plans and 2 retirees. So far, we have approximately 45 that have been affected, but we're 9.5 months through the year, right? So we don't know what that other 2.5 months is. And the resolution is we obviously have some goals that we need to meet with the resolution. It has to be a sound resolution. It has to be legally compliant. It has to be able to be administered, right? So that's one of my concerns, is we just want to make sure that we can administer it appropriately, i.e. carry out the goals, that we can administer it appropriately, i.e. carry out the goals appropriately, as well as our employees, not have them in the dark, if you will, when they go to close out their financials at the end of the year. So all of those things are being taken into account. We've been looking at the options. We've been looking at the IRS guidance on it. As I mentioned earlier, USI has their legal team that's been working on this basically from the moment we found out. Last week, there was an engagement with an attorney, plan benefit attorney from who's worked with the city in the past. He's been taking a look at the issue. Really what we're trying to do, and as we go through this, more questions come up than answers, right? Because it'll be, okay, we think we have something, and well, what about this? What about that? So really what we're trying to do is get that all documented and
Any further comments?
Just from as of right now, this year, based on this year, we're at 45 people would pay an extra $1,300 out of pocket, or 45 families.
Well, as of today, but here's the deal. So we had this HSA plan and we stacked on top of it the HRA. The HRA is technically the problem. However, there's two ways to fix it, right? So HRA is a first dollar benefit plan. So we could simply say the first dollar benefit on the HRA negates our qualified high deductible HSA plan, and all of our HSA contributions are taxable. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is, I think, what you're suggested, and that's retroactively changing our plan design back to January 1st, processing all of those claims. So those are basically the two options that we have here. Some of them have tax ramifications. Some of them could have perhaps excise ramifications, and then some of them simply have timing hurdles that we have to get over. So those are all the things that we're identifying right now. So today there's a certain number of employees. You know, there's some that are totally clear maximums. So once you get, well, it just depends on the family scenario, and that, I guess that's where I was showing you some of these examples. I'm happy to run those examples for any amount of claims that we could come up with, but we can't predict what's going to happen in a couple months. We can't predict what's going to happen in a couple months. And it's the people that haven't hit the problem yet. Can't say they're not going to hit it before year end. Now, if we change the plan before year end, that is one thing. We also do an HSA contribution on the first payroll of every month, which happens to have to be decided by tomorrow. That we're working through is, do we continue the HSA contributions or do we stop it? Back to your question, Alderman Hofer, about what kind of feedback we're going to get. The more corrections on corrections we make, the more feedback I think we get from our employees. So what we're trying to do, trying to be as thoughtful as we can up front so that we correct this one time. So I can't even tell you whether that HSA contribution will go or not. It's a matter of we get all the parties in tomorrow to figure out what we're going to.
One clarification that I think you were asking. 45 people have currently received, through the end of September to be closest on the date, have received some HRA dollars. Some of them, as Peggy mentioned, are in the clear. They've already received more than they were going to get out of the plan, and they've exceeded the $2,800 threshold. So regardless of the new plan or the old plan, they are fixed. And then there are some that would get more out of the new plan than the old plan. So, I mean, it's a combination of folks that are in each one of these different scenarios that the city administrator tried to show you in this example. We have 3 different sets of people. Some are exactly the same. Some have made a little bit more money if we would have had the new plan in place, and some would have not received monies that they did. So it's oddly about a third. Oddly about a third. So.
You mentioned possible approximately $100,000 maximum negative. How would that be?
That would be funded from our health insurance plan is approximately a $300 spend each year. We have a fund balance. So that's not an issue from a funding standpoint. It is more the recognition that we would be changing the benefit. The problem is it's really hard to predict because we can't tell what's going to happen. But the absolute worst case scenario, if every employee that's on a family plan was an example number 1 employee, which would not happen, right? We know that every single employee is not going to see 1,000 health claims, but I wanted to show you the absolute worst that it could be, and then flip it over to the end of the absolute worst that it could be, and then flip it over to the other end of the spectrum. It could actually be, if everybody was in the example number 2, the city plan would make it out. But I just want to try to bookend those extremes to talk about it. My guess is it's going to be somewhere in the middle of that. Maybe.
Impact on other budgets.
Correct. Yep. That's 100%. There's no negative impact on other budgets, obviously. But again, that's what it's for.
Any further questions? Does anybody motion to approve an amendment to the 2022 health insurance plan related to the HRA, HSA components?
I would make the,
Motion made
I'll second it.
and second. Any further comments, questions?
Is that for council agenda?
It will be on the same exact, it would be a referral to contract. And the reason this part, well, this part's obviously cleaner because we're not talking about corrections, but we are walking into open season, so we open it by like November 8th. So this piece, the 22 plan design, solidifying what that's going to be is critical forward. However, with that said, Dana and I just spoke today, and we know that we also have to have the 21 resolution going into 2022. Employees will have a lot of questions. Yeah, so we know that this hasn't relieved us from any obligation, working very hard, basically nonstop to try to get the solution 2020. And I would expect, like I said, we've been on calls with legal teams, we've been talking to tax experts. I would best guess is I would hope we'd have something by the end of that. Back to the committee on the 15th, and then to council the very next day on the
The motion's made and seconded. Any further questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next meeting is November 15th. Is there a motion to adjourn? Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?